Well, Wendy, thanks for pointing out for the past several years during the pandemic, Patrick has failed to record any of these because they're being broadcast live on ECAT.
That's
Speaking
okay.
of,
I'm sure ECAT has your back.
in keeping with an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board committee members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded by ECAT, and now me. Hey. So hello everyone. We're gonna kick off, like I said, April 11th. Finance Committee, I'm going to go down I forgot to make a list like I do every week of the names that I have to ask. So I'm going to go down the list based on the panelist list that we have here for now and do a voice vote to open the meeting. Gennaro. I didn't hear you.
He's frozen.
No. Frozen. Okay, so that was Brian. DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
You might jump back. DePietro.
Motion to be here.
Motion to be. It's going to be one of those nights, people. Olson.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Mostly present.
I am here. Helen. And I think Brian's still frozen. Is there anybody else? Wait, let me see if there's anybody else in the waiting room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Brian makes 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, perfect. We are kicked off. Good evening, everybody. All right, so tonight we have a decent list. We're going to kick off with warrant articles, standard process provide. Unless, Wendy, this is up to you. Do you want to do the reserve transfer pieces first, or do you want to go? It's up to you. Is that an easier sort of?
We can just go in order because I'm here for the duration, so that's fine.
Okay, so let's see. Where are my warrant articles? So we're going to start off with the warrant articles. Obviously, benefit for everyone is that these are not all of them. There are going to be some that will be deliberated upon and voted on at the joint meeting coming up at the end of April. So we're going to get on the list and touch on the ones that we can touch on tonight. I have back of napkin said that's 1 through 4, number 8. Actually, Wendy, you just told me that there's also probably 4 payment of bills.
That's included in that. I have I did a PowerPoint in case you want some visuals for people watching.
I would love some visuals.
I can share my screen.
Do you want me to still read the warrant, or is the visual different than my normal stuttering?
So let me just.
Brian came back, I think.
So if you wanted to go in order.
Wendy, you are above and beyond tonight. You're telling me how to actually run the meeting for the first time. Now we got visuals. This is the greatest meeting I've ever been on. All right, let's do this. Article 1, everybody, as you can see on this beautiful slide that Wendy has provided, acceptance of annual reports. See if the town will vote to accept the reports of the Select Board, Town Administrator, Assessors, Board of Health, Town Clerk, Treasurer, Collectors of Taxes, School Committee, Town Accountant, Director of Public Works, and other departments, boards, and committees of the town are taking either action relative thereto. The Select Board has already recommended. Any thoughts, comments, deliberation on this one? Any questions, any thoughts on it in general? Thank you, Mike. I was mid-sentence. This is just essentially this is what we do every time. This is previous annual reports that we're putting into the I don't even know what the word is.
Record.
The vault, as it were, of the storage of it.
Your standard number 1 article at every annual town meeting.
Mike, did you have something to say there?
I did. I motioned to recommend because it is the standard one.
Do we have a second?
DiNapoli, second.
I knew it was going to be. Let's go down the list. Is Brian back yet? Did he manage to get back in? He's there. I'll come back to him. DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Pietro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Famosi, yes.
Island Living. It's going slow. Patrick's a yes. And Brian.
I'm a yes. Yes, I'm a yes.
Welcome back, man.
Yo, stuck in the Matrix. That was fun.
All right, so that's number 1. Let's go to number
Okay.
2. Spending
So
limits for
actually, sorry,
revolt. Number 1, jump 2.
number 2 has not actually been voted on yet, and
Okay.
I believe that so number 2 is the establish the spending limits for the revolving funds, and I think a couple of these, I anticipate the amounts are going to increase a little bit.
Okay.
Potentially for the Board of Health betterment fees and the DPW road maintenance fund, and possibly the DPW vehicle and equipment revolving fund. And these are spending limits. You can't spend more obviously than what's in the fund, but these limits limit how much can be spent in a given fiscal year. So
Okay.
we'll vote on that another time.
Alrighty, sounds good. So then on to 3, elected officials compensation. See if the town will vote to fix the salary and compensation of all elected officers of the town, not all elected, as provided by section 108 of chapter 41 of the general laws as follows. Select board, each member 1,800. Board of health, each member 1,000. Board of assessors, each member 1,800. Moderator 100. This is an annual article required by statute to set the salary levels for all compensated elected officials. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Is this the same as last year's?
Every
It
time.
is.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no. Is there a cost of living increase that ever hits this, or is it just?
These are just really they're nominal amounts. I think they're probably the same since I started working here. And if they've changed, they have not obviously changed by much because they're pretty small to begin with.
That's what I assumed. I just wasn't sure if there's any like statute for it. So, okay. Mike,
Motion to recommend DePietro.
Christina,
Second.
there we go. DiNardo,
Yes.
Napoli,
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Olson,
Olson, yes.
Bamosi,
Mimosi's yes.
and I'm a yes. That is recommended. All right. So 4 in the draft we have does not have anything, but Wendy, you said at the top that you do have something for this.
Right, so there's an invoice, it's an invoice from Clean Harbors, $14,968, which will be funded from water surplus. So Clean Harbors was the vendor that we partnered with for Household Hazardous Waste Day last year. And for some reason, there was an issue with them not sending the contract back in time, or so the bill inadvertently ended up not getting paid because of an issue with the contract, and so it kind of lingered and it didn't make it on the year-end encumbrance list. So as a result, we still need to pay that bill. And the water department sponsors Household Hazardous Waste Day to ensure that contaminants don't get into the water supply.
Awesome. I have one question,
Yes.
which is, do you know offhand when the next hazardous waste day is?
I
I'm
think
putting you on the
it's
spot.
is it April 20th perhaps?
It's April
Yeah,
20th?
It's usually in April.
It's been a Facebook. It's a limited one this year, but yeah, it's out on Facebook if you look at the town, or even on. I think it's on the town crier every week.
I gotta check, because I definitely have stuff. Okay.
Is
That was my only
April
question.
20th, is that a
It's limited this
Saturday?
year, so just
I think it is, actually. Does anyone else, while I'm looking that up, does anyone else have any questions? April 20th is indeed a Saturday.
Did this 15K hit free cash last year when all was said and done?
Well, it would have gone into water surplus because it would have been paid out of the Water Enterprise Fund.
Oh, got it.
So that's why we're going to fund it from water surplus.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
it.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts, comments on Article 4?
No, it just does look like that's April 20th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m.
See, he's still the captain, even if he's the assistant chief. Thank you, Tim.
Motion to
Seeing
recommend
no
DePietro.
other. Say that again.
I think you know what I said. Motion to
I-
recommend DePietro.
Thank you.
Second, DiNapoli.
It's like a Greek chorus. DiNardo,
yes.
DiNapoli,
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Olson,
Olson, yes.
Bamosi,
Mimosi's yes.
and I am a yes. All right.
Thank you.
I've lost my tab for the What's Article 5?
So rescind a borrowing authorization.
Oh, yes. So, see, the town will vote to rescind 1,367,000 of the borrowing authorized under Article 19 of the May 15th, 2017 annual town meeting. Said funding originally appropriated for Depot Street water mains, but no longer needed as the project is complete, or take any other action relative thereto. We've done these many a times. It's a housekeeping article for a leftover from the initial authorization. Wendy, the only question I have is was this our typical, we're going to borrow as much as we can to fund this in completion? We obviously are making some overruns and some overlay considerations, and this is the remainder that was not used, is my essential assumption.
Yeah, we did not borrow that money.
Oh, this was just appropriated. Okay.
Right. So when you do a borrowing authorization, it's just the authorization to borrow, but we didn't borrow the whole 3,667,000. And so that authorization would still stay on your books if you didn't rescind it. If we had surplus borrowing proceeds, it's a different process for that.
Got it. That's actually in the explanation that I neglected to read out loud, which would have helped us all significantly before I asked the question. Got it. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, etc. on Article 8?
Motion to recommend, DePietro.
Second, DiNapoli.
Go down the list. DiNardo.
DiNardo is a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Ramosi.
Mosey's yes.
And I am a yes. All right, so that's the first section. Obviously, we're skipping supplemental budgets, operating, capital.
Right. We'll be finalizing those in time for the budget hearings.
Right. And then I think, Stephanie, I believe you're up. I'm pretty sure you're 9 through 17 with some potentially some questions in here, but these are all sort of on the CPA and the planning side of the house, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I will pass over to number 9, which Wendy already has up. Report and fiscal year 25 budget of Community Preservation Committee. You guys can read the existing purposes and the amounts, but the explanation here is this article proposes the fiscal year 2025 budget for the Community Preservation Committee. Amounts to be funded shall be considered separate appropriations. Any questions, thoughts? Stephanie, do you have anything to say on this one, or any explanation there too?
I mean, this is pretty much the standard article for setting the budget for the CPA for fiscal year current. So this would be for fiscal year 2025.
Thank you. Seems like a pretty simple one to me.
Oh, I just wanted to mention too. So Stephanie, sorry, if you have something else too that you want to show, I'll stop sharing my screen. But even though this article, it's a little bit misleading, because even though it says it's the budget of the Community Preservation Committee, the CPC, they like to vote their projects in separate articles. And so this doesn't necessarily show the whole picture of the CPC budget, because a lot of these articles that you're going to see following this article will be funded from estimated Community Preservation Fund revenues in the next fiscal year. So this is only just a piece of that budget.
So I guess to that point then, right? Like it is an administrative expense line item, debt service, which makes perfect sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the budgeted reserve just essentially we need to have some level of reserve for a rainy day for a CPA fund?
Honestly, it's basically a plug. So if you take your total estimated revenues and that's one total, and then you set aside amounts for administrative expenses and debt service and all of that, and then you have a difference between what you're projecting for your revenues and what you're gonna set aside or appropriate, you've got that difference there. And we put that into an annual budgeted reserve, because if you don't do that, if for some reason during the year you needed to access that money, it wouldn't be available to you. Your only source of funding would be your unreserved fund balance or any other reserves. during the year. Now, typically, because the CPA fund has such a healthy balance, it's probably not going to be a problem, but we just put it in there to show so that you can see what the whole amount of the budget is, and it's a way to appropriate from your estimated revenues, like after you set the tax rate. That makes any sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts on Article, what are we on? 9. I guess, wait, so essentially, this is your, I'm going to highly simplify it, but this is your base stakes. And then Article 10 and 11 and 12, that's your individual, it says it here, right? But it's essentially the separate appropriations are the other articles here. So to your point, Wendy, if you didn't have this additional plug, for lack of a better term, then you were in a position of, hey, something else needs to be paid for unforeseen, you'd have to go back to town meeting.
Well, you still would have to appropriate this at town meeting.
Sure, but like in any way, shape, or form, you don't have the money until town meeting votes on it. But this is your stopgap measure.
Right.
Yeah. Alrighty. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, etc.?
Motion to recommend DePietro.
Do I have a second?
Second, DiNapoli.
I don't even have to ask. DiNardo.
DiNardo's a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Ramosi.
Mosey's yes.
I am a yes. On to 10.
And
So-
on this
Wow,
one.
all right. I like this. We got a holder. All right. Let's talk about them all.
Okay, so this is the standard request from the Affordable Housing Trust to fund their trust fund to support affordable housing. And the request is for $291,374, of which $229,000 shall be raised from the Community Preservation Fund fiscal 2025 annual revenues, and $62,374 will be transferred from the Community Preservation Funds reserved for community housing. So
Question.
every year you have to set aside 10%
All
of
right.
CPA funds towards community housing, open space, and historic preservation.
Thank you. Any thoughts, questions on 10? This is also a very familiar article that comes up.
Yeah, and just to do a little pitch for the work that the Affordable Housing Trust has been doing, there are 2 houses that will be built by Habitat for Humanity, one on Pequannock Avenue and one on Morris Road, that will be provided to a qualified family at an affordable level. The Pequannock Avenue property is currently under construction.
That is fantastic. I did not know that. I feel like I might have known that, but I'm getting up there. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on Article 10?
Motion to recommend DePietro.
Do I have a second?
Second, DiNapoli.
DiNardo.
DiNardo's a yes.
DiNapoli.
Sorry, DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Ramosi.
Mosey's yes.
And I'm a yes. Christina, I thought you got trapped in the Matrix for a second. I thought you were following Brian.
I know. Sorry about that. It was
No.
my mouse.
No problem. I work on Zoom all day. I find if we don't have a moment where someone doesn't unmute, it's not a real meeting. Article 11. Stephanie, back to you.
So this article is for some improvements to the community garden. And a little bit of background on the community garden. It was first established as a joint venture between the Agricultural Commission and the Conservation Commission. It's located at Wheaton Farm. And I've worked for the town for 17 years. I think this was probably 13 years since the ground was first tilled for the gardens, and fencing was installed and some other appurtenances to support the effort. So this is a request for $4,882 to rebuild and replace the fencing, compost bins, and some other infrastructure improvements. And I can tell you that the past couple of years, it's very popular, the community garden. All the 25 spaces have been leased out, and I think we have another waiting list this year.
Is it an annual lease? Do you have to request to get an annual? Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. Yep.
Alrighty. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on Article 11?
Any thoughts of expanding it?
I don't know. It's just been the last couple of years where there's been a waiting list. So there may be some consideration to expand it. We're also, the Conservation Commission also has a license agreement with Langwater Farm. They do farm some of the fields down there in return for, they mow the fields, which would have been an expense to the town otherwise. And they also contribute, I think it's a certain number of debit cards that are valued at, I think it's a couple $100 that then are distributed to veterans who qualify.
Oh, outstanding.
I had a sandwich from there today, and they're the best. And they didn't
Aren't they great?
Oh my God.
And I mean, they're really so healthy too.
I can't even start. This is like, this goes into like influencer, like announcement territory. But even then, when they said they were opening it, I was like, I will be here every day, and I'm trying my darndest to get there every day because they're so good. Anyway, back to the article at hand. Any other thoughts, questions on 11?
Motion to recommend DePietro.
Second, DiNapoli.
All right. DiNardo.
DiNardo's yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
DePietro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Mimosi.
Mostly is yes.
And I am a yes. And their pizza's good too. Article 12.
So this is a request for CPA funding in the amount of $54,395 to begin replacing the signage at the various conservation areas owned and managed by the town and the Conservation Commission. Last year, you may have noticed the new signage throughout town. The town worked on a sign master plan funded by Mass Work Grant funds. Thank you very much. And the Conservation Commission is now in the process of replacing some of the aging signs out there. So this money will be used to install 14 new signs at various locations.
The only question I had is that the explanation is very enticing, and that it says an additional 3 signs will be funded. Are those brand new, not currently labeled areas that are now part of this purview, or are they just new signs based on the old sign is completely deteriorated?
I believe now that's Patrick, I can't answer that, and I hadn't thought to ask that because we have acquired some new lands.
I figured, yeah.
Over the last couple of years, but I think that they're integrated with other conservation areas. But I would guess that if those areas don't have signs and need them, that might be what the 3 additional signs are.
Stephanie, I'm going to say this as a complete compliment. I've never seen you not have an answer for anything because you are quite possibly the most prepared person that's ever come to any of these meetings. So there is a point of pride that I'm taking right now that I was able to ask a question you did not have an immediate response for. And I'm going to ride that for a while. So we're going to move on into anybody else that has a question about this one, but I'm just there's a glow now.
Oh, just wait till we get to the last CPA article. I wasn't as that as I should be. I can speak to it, but I may ask you to allow me to find an image for that.
No, don't go find the answer and ruin this for me.
No, it's not an answer.
It's Mr. DePietro when we need him.
Yeah.
Motion to recommend DePietro.
Sir?
Second, DiNapoli?
DiNardo.
DiNardo's a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Most is yes.
And I am a yes. That is recommend for 12. All right, on to Keach Field.
So, again, I don't know how many current members of the Finance Committee were here when the Keach Field was acquired by the town. It has 2 softball fields and a soccer field. It's kind of multi-purpose. And there was no fencing installed around the perimeter of the property. And what they're finding is the most northern softball field, balls are being hit and are making their way into the woods, which makes it a little dangerous or unsafe for kids who are playing to have to go shag balls out there. So this is to put up a fence that would prevent the balls from traveling into the woods.
There's nothing behind there. It's the wooded area. There's no residential back behind this area.
No. In fact, it's conservation land. It's more.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, comments on, I've lost my tab again, Article 13.
I do. I'm sorry. Which fields are these?
So this is the Keach
Chestnut
Field
Street.
on Chestnut Street.
Over behind Target.
Who plays events there?
It's primarily a practice field, and it's soccer and girls softball.
Like is it public school, or is it town rec teams, or who's playing there?
The town's girls softball league and the soccer. I don't think it's school. I think it's some of the organized sports teams.
I'm pretty sure it's Houston
See,
Soccer.
Patrick, you spoke too soon.
No, but I'm pride because I didn't ask that one. That one's fine.
Well, I'm just curious if it was, are these teams who are renting the space, or is this just public use space?
The space gets booked through the Recreation Commission. So the Recreation Commission manages the fields.
And there's no cost associated with renting the field?
I don't believe so.
I think there might be some kind of charge though, because we do have a little bit of revenue. It's not a lot going into one of our revolving accounts.
Yeah, it must be based on, because if it's rec associated, that's part of the rec fee. It's not just, obviously it's establishment, but it's part of the rec fee is for maintenance and upkeep and typically field rental or field association.
And then I'm just curious, what's the length of the fence and the height of the fence if the primary function of the fence is just to keep balls out of the woods?
And
I mean, that's going to have to be a pretty tall fence to keep softballs out of the woods. Soccer balls, maybe not, but
I don't have the answer for that.
I know my daughter used to play softball, and so I know that, some of those balls, if they hit hard, even if they hit the ground, they can still have a lot of force on them, and they could certainly roll out into those woods.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, when Tom Broussard met with the select board, he had also mentioned, this poison ivy in the woods, tripping hazards.
Yes.
So I don't think it's going to be super high.
So it's not just about balls going in the woods. I guess that's
Sounds like it's kids going in the
$20,000
woods.
just to prevent balls from going in the woods.
Well, it sounds like it's a
Well,
perimeter.
it's preventing the players from having to go into the woods.
Right.
Okay.
And I can get you an answer on whether or not there's a charge for using the fields and how that's managed.
Yeah. I think the fence, I don't think the fence is going to be much higher than 5 feet. So, because I thought I also
I think that's
it was going to have like that that coating over the top.
right, the rubberization. So let's see.
I think there's also some fencing already in the beginning, like the entranceway to the park, so it's probably a continuation of that fencing is my assumption. I don't know that for sure, but
I'm pulling up the application if that is helpful.
I'm sorry I'm just trying to paint a picture of what a fence truly would do.
Well, I think Wendy hit it. If the ball's rolling, if you miss, you have a ground ball that's hit and it rolls past a player and into the woods.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's the point of pride if someone can hit it over it, right? It's like, nice job. Well done. That one stays
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I think it's the distance is probably
I mean, I think these are good questions.
yeah.
All around, because it's I mean, looking at the price tag, I mean, it's a non-trivial price tag, and it's I get the sense that it's probably a little bit more than just an outfield fence.
I think it's a perimeter fence around the entirety of the field.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
It's 631 feet of 4-foot high galvanized chain link fence.
It's not like they're building a green monster or fencing to keep to kind of demark the outfield and a softball field.
Wait, so there's no fence there now
Correct.
on that side, to Tim's point. Yeah, so I mean, perimeter fencing plus bragging rights if you can hit it over it. That's worth a couple bucks.
yeah, I mean, I think also it would help with the maintenance of the field if it cuts down on
Oh yeah.
deer control. I know it's a heavy deer area. We do also use that property for landing zones for med flight and such. So keeping that field preserved and in good working order is of importance in other matters as well.
Okay.
Good questions,
All
everybody.
right. I'm not familiar with the field, so sorry for the questions. I just wanted to understand it.
No, they're actually
What we're here for.
Again, I think they're good questions.
yeah, they're nice fields. There's a little playground there and everything too, so it probably added security for that, and just a couple little things there. But it's a nice little area.
Propose the next FinCom meeting to be at this field.
I think barbecue.
FinCom.
Are you coming, Tim? You gonna charter a quick helicopter ride over?
That's why I got to keep it a landing field.
This contract.
I'll help you paint the H.
We are all punchy tonight, people. It's going well. Any other questions or thoughts on Article 13?
Motion to recommend to Petra.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second to Napoli?
DiNardo.
Rose, yes.
DiNapoli.
To Napoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Mimosi.
Moses, yes.
I am a yes. That is 13. All right. On to Swift's Park. Article 14.
Okay. This is for redevelopment of Swift's Park. And I do have a little presentation I can do on this one.
Sure. Take it away.
So I'm
Ooh,
opening.
Robert's here. Hold on. Let me add Robert. Put him on my list.
And I apologize, I will not do as great a job presenting this as Ed Hands did or has done when he's presented it, but
Who could? It's Ed Hands, the national treasure.
all right, now you have to figure out how to share my screen. There we go.
Got it? There you go.
All right. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Furnace Village area, and this shows this little rectangle here. This is the area primarily along South Street and Foundry Street, where the old foundry was, which is how you get the name Furnace Village. It includes the old pond and other properties. And this moving forward, this is just shows the neighborhood, that it ran north to south and as well as east to west. And it's the original neighborhood was the core of Foundries on 106 workers' homes, and the redeveloped Swifts Park will recreate the neighborhood core and connect a larger mixed-use neighborhood served by the future sidewalk that's being designed and proposed for along Foundry Street between Depot Street and Robert Drive, over by where the Target is and the Highland Plaza. So where is this located? It is located right here at the intersection of Pequonnet Avenue and Foundry Street. This is what it looks like today. This was a memorial park that was dedicated to Private Lawrence Swift. He served as a paramedic during the 1918 pandemic and died after contracting the influenza, the flu that was running rampant at the time. The idea is to redevelop this park into a memorial park that recognizes the first responders and the victims of the 1918 influenza pandemic, as well as the 2020 COVID pandemic. And also to recognize and acknowledge the important industrial history of the Furnace Village. This right now, you saw an aerial of what it looks like. Right now, the only commemoration there is a tablet style marker that indicates it's Swifts Park, and it talks about the forges on the other side of the tablet, the forges that existed there, and a little bit of their importance. In 1974, I believe, it was this area, Furnace Village, was designated as a National Historic District. So why do we need to revitalize Memorial Park? Well, as I mentioned, to recognize the heroes who lost their lives in each of those significant pandemics. It will recreate the original village core with a beautiful and educational amenity. Part of the open space and recreation plan calls for mini parks in each of the neighborhoods in Easton. And South Easton doesn't have a park, and other areas of town do. So it would actually provide something in South Easton that would be unique. It could serve as a trailhead for the nearby conservation land, as well as a rest stop. A lot of people bicycle down Bay Road and Pequonnet Avenue. And Arlene Keach, who owns the property that's adjacent to the park, has told us that frequently people would stop and seek water as they continue on their way. It complements the revitalization and historic preservation investments that the town has made with CPA funds. And again, it would foster appropriate neighborhood development consistent with the Furnace Village District zoning. There's been a lot of new development in this area as a result of the zoning that was adopted by the town about 3 years ago. And a lot of that new development is of a neighborhood type, and you have mixed use. So this would really complement that district and tie it together as a neighborhood. We've been asked the question, why now, and not wait until the Foundry Street improvements are completed. So for those of you who may not be aware, the town is working with Mass DOT on a TIP project for improvements to Boundary Street along between Depot Street and where it becomes Eastman Street, heading towards Mansfield. Those improvements will include geometrical improvements to the roadway itself to make it safer and help facilitate traffic. It will include changes to the signaling there, and also a sidewalk on the north side is being proposed, as well as a multi-use path on, I'm sorry, I had that wrong. A sidewalk on the north side, which is where the park is located, and then a multi-use path on the south side. And waiting till that roadway is complete, which would probably be around 2036, would just increase the cost of development substantially. And based on current inflation rates, that is estimated to be $1 million.
I like your optimism.
That it will only be?
Yeah.
If Ed Hands did the projections, I thought it was a little low myself. So, and these are just other points to support the project, which is that it should include significant matching funds. The select board appointed a committee, the Swifts Park Committee, back in 2023 to work on a design for the park and to promote and advance the park through completion. And the committee has committed to raising matching funds to help offset the cost. It conforms to recommendations in Envision Easton, again, to have parks in neighborhood locations. And it has significant community support, and it would be outside of Northeastern, where a lot of a lot of investment has been made in historic preservation and amenities. And again, this is really an area that is coming to life and revitalizing with the new development that's going on. Okay, I'm going to skip this. I mean, CPA projects have invested a lot in Northeastern. Kind of the point of this is what the outcome has been from those investments, that the historic buildings that have been preserved, the expansion of public parks, including the Governor Ames Estate, and the increase in residential housing. Shovel Works was funded in part through CPA funding with historic preservation and community housing in mind. So it's felt that a similar investment in this area would have similar economic and community benefit results. So let's see, I want to get to the park. So a couple of designs were considered. We're showing them here. The committee felt that these were, while they were very attractive, they were more suited towards an urban environment, and the committee was really interested in preserving the small town and kind of rural character of Easton, and this is the design that was decided upon. You can see here that there's going to be a center feature, a sculpture that kind of informs and brings to mind the first responders to the pandemics. There will be a granite wall and monolith that will be engraved with information about the district and also about the first responders. The paths going throughout will all be fully accessible, making it accessible to all of Easton's residents. And the parking will be improved here. And you can see there will be some landscaping that will make this very attractive. So the total cost with escalation and an incidental factor was $963,648. We reduced the cost by preserving the essentials only, and that's what you saw in that design I just showed you, and a realistic plan for donations and some basic site work that will be done by the DPW.
Stephanie, one question I have as you're going through this is the area that's right there now, that's essentially where I assume the parking lot's going to go. Is that part of town-owned land, or is that going to be, that, or is that part of that building that's to the north here?
Right. So right now, some of their parking is encroaching on town land. And so what you see here is all town property. There is a right-of-way easement that runs through here, and we're working on a plan, and we've been talking with both the abutters, because actually there are 3 abutters. The folks that own Harmony Hall, that's tucked behind Quanticut Avenue here, also benefit from the right-of-way easement. So that will need to be redefined, but they have all agreed that in support of the park and cooperating with the easement.
Excellent. Thank you.
So that's and this just shows some of, the type of the costs of some similar size parks that were done in previous years.
I just got to jump in and say that I'm downright excited that we're able to. I didn't know the history of Smith Park, and that we'd be able to take that and do something to commemorate the first responders in the COVID crisis. I'm personally excited about that. As soon as you started talking about it, I was like, "Oh, can it be something about COVID too?"
Yes,
beat me to that punch quickly. But no, that's it looks fantastic.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the things. So again, Ed Hands and John Ventresco have been co-chairs for this committee, and they did some research just a couple of weeks ago, because we haven't heard a lot about other COVID memorials being constructed and acted on. And in Massachusetts, they couldn't find any, and just a couple across the country.
Wow.
So this could be one of the first of its kind.
Anyway, it looks fantastic. I like the work. It's appropriate, but those are just my comments.
We are big fans of first responders here on the FinCom, mostly because of
Captain Pelosi.
particular member, I would say. So I concur there. Stephanie, thank you.
Just a couple of questions.
Go for it.
So this is for the Spanish flu, though. This is a memorial for the Spanish flu, not COVID. Is that?
No, it is a memorial. It's a memorial to recognize the first responders and victims of both the 1918 influenza pandemic and the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, excellent. Good causes. What's the acreage?
It is just about a quarter acre. It's a small park, but it will be a showcase for that area. It will be, it's not sitting right at the gateway, but frequently gateway areas and markers are a little bit beyond that area, but it will really, one of the words that I've heard people use, it will be transformative.
Stephanie, quick question on the, in terms of the fundraising projects, are they looking to sell benches, bricks, this kind of thing in order to raise those funds? Is that part of the planning?
So they have, that was one of the slides I skipped over. They have platinum, gold, and silver level for the larger donations. And then you saw the circular area in the plan. Those are granite tiles, granite blocks, and those will be sold. Yes.
I wanted to get that out there in case anybody was wondering. And also, I had the privilege of working with these first responders throughout the COVID pandemic. I can't speak on the flu pandemic in 1918.
I think you were a responder, weren't you?
Yes, indeed. But I always take an opportunity to just give my thanks to them as a resident of the community, and having the privilege to work shoulder to shoulder with those guys. I know the commitment they put in. It was really impressive, and just to say thank you to them is an understatement. But they really did a great job and dedicated a lot of time and personal sacrifice to that. So anytime I get a chance to pat them on the back, I always try.
Yeah, and certainly those are the true frontline. Ed has pointed out, and I remember the first time I went into the grocery store, and someone I know was stocking the shelves, and other people, and I thank them for being there. I mean, those folks were putting themselves at risk as well. So it really was amazing how the community pulled together, and who those folks were that really made it possible for other people to take care of themselves.
You know who one of those folks were? Tim Vamosi, everybody. Tim Vamosi was personally responsible for me getting my COVID shot. So just any opportunity I can to make him blush completely is pretty much the best part of this gig. So we'll get to the end of this meeting and we'll have another moment of that, but we'll speak to that in a moment. Stephanie, thank you so much. Anybody else, any questions on the article that I've yet again forgotten? 14. Thoughts?
Motion to recommend to Petra.
Second to Napoli.
Look at Robert coming in, trying to take your second away from you. Bernardo.
All right.
It was a yes, and thank you, Stephanie, for the explanation.
Oh, you're welcome.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Vamosi, yes.
Helen is yes, and Jenkins. Welcome to the party.
Jenkins, yes. Definitely excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
As always. All right. Thank you for 14. That is a recommend. On to 15, Historical Society Fire Suppression. Stephanie, do you have anything else to share, or do we want to bring the other slides back? Well, you probably have something for 16, I imagine, for the zoning overlay.
I do. I have a single slide for Lullaby Lane, just to show people where it is. And then, yes, I would like to do a recap. I know I did a presentation for the Finance Committee on what the zoning was back in February, but I would like to just show you what's happened in the meantime and the final district.
So I'll just read 15 then, and then when we get back to 16, you can reshare, or you can reshare now if you want to. Article 15, to see if the town will vote in accordance with the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee to appropriate the sum of $325,000 from Community Preservation Fund fiscal 2025 annual revenues to install a fire suppression system at the Eastern Historical Society. This article would provide $325,000 in funding to install a modern fire suppression system to protect the Historical Society's circa 1882 National Historic Landmark Building, which is the former Old Colony Railroad Station on Mechanic Street, and the historic artifacts and archives it contains. Historical Society will provide $40,000 of additional funding towards the total project cost. Any additional comments? That's pretty well crafted, but any additional comments, thoughts, etc. from you, Stephanie, that adds color?
What I can say is that we expected the Historical Society to come, I think last year with this request, and I think they put it on hold. But have realized that they really need to take this action to ensure that this important asset is protected. And the artifacts and historical documents that it houses.
Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I do.
I'm a little confused.
You go first, Robert. And
go ahead, Brian.
Thank you.
No, I'm just a little confused. Is it 325 or 365? Because it says additional $40,000.
Oh, is the 325 including that 40,000 you're saying?
No, they're looking for 325,000 from the CPA,
Mhm.
and they would provide an additional 40,000 towards the total project cost.
So total project is 365.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stephanie, it's Brian. Just on my side, you now have over $1 million in total spend on these articles. I'm just curious. It sounds like they're all you have all this money now. What kind of dent is this going to put into your funds in general? No, I'm sure it's well planned, of course, but I'm curious now how cash trapped you might potentially be in the CPA.
Wendy, do you have that handy?
Let me look that up, but what I will say is that all of this funding for these projects are coming from next year's revenue. So it's not putting a dent basically in the unreserved fund balance that exists.
Okay. So then what's the question then would be, what's kind of the historical average on what you would pull in for revenue? Ballpark.
This year's budget is $2,290,000.
And so, Wendy, this won't hit the books until next year?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is fiscal 25. Let's see.
Which is July, right?
Yes, July 1st.
And just because I always think to say it in the context of this, that you know the one of the benefits of the CPA funding is what it can be spent on. It cannot be transferred back to Patrick's party slush fund, which I keep asking for. Frankly.
So if
What's
the duration?
Tricentennial, Patrick?
I mean, if we want to rename it, I'm down.
Is there a time frame duration for this particular fire suppression? Is it a 6-month project, 12-month project?
I don't even think it's a 6-month project. I know Oaks Ames Memorial Hall they didn't put in a fire suppression system, but they put in a fire alarm system, and it did not take long.
Can you see this okay? Because
This is your 25 estimated, right?
Right.
Okay.
Is that clear? I have a big monitor, and sometimes the stuff looks really small on the screen when I share it.
You're at 2.29 million for the year in total. Right. So you're spending about half, give or take, on these types of projects with half in reserve.
So so remember when we looked at the original CPA budget article, we said that's not the whole picture.
Right.
This 2.2 million is really like the whole picture, right?
Sure.
And then these are all of the appropriations from the various articles, with a little bit coming from this fund balance reserve for community housing. I think we got an additional state distribution from the state trust funds, and we had to reserve that money and set that aside. So that's why it's getting appropriated later to the Affordable Housing Trust. So these are all the projects, and so the fund balance, the unreserved fund balance as of July was 5.1 million. We did appropriate some money at the special town meeting, so right now there's a balance of 4.6 million in the unreserved fund balance, which will probably grow back to an amount closer to 5 million at the end of the year when everything all closes out. So, because this is just the balance as of July 1st, doesn't include fiscal 24's results of operations.
Well, thank you for that. I trust that everyone is, making the appropriate decisions, but I just have to double check. So I appreciate that insight.
It's the first time anyone's ever accused me of making appropriate decisions. I love it. I'm taking that to the bank. Any other thoughts, any other comments, any other questions on 15 for fire suppression?
I'd just make a shameless plug that's a really great building. There's some really cool stuff inside there. If anybody hasn't been inside, It's definitely worth a visit. They have some great carriages. They have a really old, I forget what year it is, but a motor engine from the early 1900s.
Oh, cool.
Actually, they also have like all of our handwritten fire logs dating all the way back to the early 1900s as well. Very, very cool place. You could get lost in there for a couple hours.
Tim's signature in those is really elaborate. Because now we're just essentially making you a vampire at this point. That you're never aging. Any other thoughts, comments, jokes about Tim's vampire status before we move on to
Motion to recommend to Petra.
Second it,
Napoli.
Jenkins.
I'm giving Jenkins that one. I'm giving it to
Mr.
him.
Jenkins, you're just like jumping in my spot tonight.
Trying to give you a little break, Kristen. Just to give you a little break.
Unequivocally the dorkiest committee, and I live for it every time. DiNardo.
DiNardo is a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Vamosi is yes.
I am a yes, and Jenkins.
Jenkins, yes.
Thank you, sir. All right, on to 16, which I think is going to be a big one, because this is the follow-up, as you said, Stephanie.
Would you like to skip to 17 just to get it out of the way? And then
You want to do 17 first, or is it?
Because it seems much easier, straightforward. 16 is certainly the hot topic du jour.
That works for me.
Yeah, let's jump to 17. Good call.
All right, let me just find that. So 17 is for the town to vote to accept Lullaby Lane. Mm-hmm. This is a road that is part of the Tanglewood 2 subdivision. It was one of the last roads and lots to be completed and fully developed. And the road has been inspected throughout its construction period. I did the initial site inspections myself in a different role. And then more recently, as they finished and completed the roadway, we contract out with a professional engineer to do the review. But it is ready for acceptance. It was always intended to be a road and accepted by the town when the subdivision decision was issued. So that's what we have.
Thoughts,
Motion
questions?
to accept.
Oh, jeez, he's going right after. He's going after Petro's role now. This is lovely. We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? Mike, do it.
Second, Petra.
To Natalie.
Oh, did I share my screen? I didn't even show it to you. I thought I had.
This one's pretty straightforward. I think we're fine.
Okay.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you.
All right. DiNardo.
DiNardo's a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
I'm going to vote no, just to spite both of you. Petro.
Petra, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Vamosi.
Vamosi is yes.
I'm a yes. And Jenkins.
Yes.
Thank you. All right,
Yes.
so let's go back to 18.
Okay. 16. I will.
Like a trap. Take it away.
Okay, and again, let's see if this
Yep, you're loading in.
works easily. From the beginning. Okay. So I think you will recall back when I was before you in February that the MBTA Communities Multifamily by Right Housing Act was passed in January of 2021 as part of the Economic Development Bond Bill. And it applies to all cities and towns that either host an MBTA transit station or are adjacent to an MBTA a town that hosts a transit station. And in Easton's case, we are abutters to Stoughton, Brockton, and Mansfield, who all have a commuter rail station within their communities. So that makes Easton required to comply with the law. And basically, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. What the zoning requires, what the law was a section that was added to Chapter 40A, which is the Zoning Act, which allows communities to establish zoning. And 3A requires that an MBA community have at least one zoning district in their community that allows multifamily housing by right. And communities that don't comply will, in addition to the fact that it is the law, they will no longer be eligible for certain state economic development funding programs. And Easton has benefited significantly over the past 12 years from these type of grants. The MassWorks has funded the roadway improvements on Main Street and helped fund the Five Corners Sewer District. We received some money as an award to do some investigation on the industrial park and many other projects that really have resulted in significant economic growth and development in the areas where those funds have been spent. And again, I point to the downtown area, which was really revitalized. You have several restaurants that are operating there. You can see from the picture here how vibrant the street scape is as a result. And the Five Corners District is seeing a lot of new growth. I talked about that with the zoning policies and changes that have been made, but again, those investments and the funds that we've received over the last 2 years are helping to fund the design work for the Boundary Street Route 106 project. Okay. Additionally, it is consistent with the town trying to meet the needs of its residents. The Massachusetts is in a housing crisis. Easton just does not have enough housing to support the residents, people who want to live in Easton, people who currently live in Easton and want to stay in Easton. Finding housing can be difficult, especially if your life circumstances change. This is a zoning requirement and not a building mandate. The district needs to be able to allow development as of right, just meaning that if a developer wanted to develop land with multifamily housing, there would not be this onerous process they'd have to go through. There's no special permits. There would be a simple review by the planning board, site plan review, just to make sure that there's proper access into and out of a property and that there are proper buffers between the adjacent properties, but that the town couldn't just say, no, you can't build that. The district, the guidelines that were issued by the Office of Housing and Livable Communities requires that as an adjacent community, Easton must have at least 50 acres in total for the district. It can be comprised of sub-districts. The sub-districts have to be at least 5 acres of contiguous land, and at least one of those districts has to be 25 acres in contiguous land. And you'll see where that comes into play when we look at the districts. And the minimum allowance is 15 units per acre. So it must be able to support 15 units per acre. In addition, district-wide, it has to support 10% of the municipality's permanent housing stock. Easton's permanent housing stock number is 9,126, which means Easton's district must be able to accommodate 913 units. And when I say must, that's if it were to be developed or redeveloped. It doesn't mean that the housing has to be built. It's just if someone wants to build, that they can build to that level of density and, you know, the potential could support 913. So the planning board has been working since May of last year to conduct public outreach, get input from the public and feedback on the process and also on the proposed districts. We've held 12 public planning board meetings. There's been a lot of discussion about the potential districts in a public format. We've received public testimony, both in person and written, and we've presented, thank you, Finance Committee, to 20 plus municipal boards between the end of December and just a couple of weeks ago, and just doing this as another way of presenting on the zoning. We've had a dedicated webpage that we've published and updated on a regular basis and run a promotional banner on the town website. The point is trying to get the word out, trying to get people educated and understanding what this zoning is and why it's important to Easton. This is where the planning board started. Well, let me go back a little bit. Back in 2022, when the guidelines, the draft guidelines for this zoning were first issued by Housing and Livable Communities, the select board appointed a MBTA Community Zoning Implementation Review Team. Their charge was to review the draft guidelines and make comments on behalf of the town, identify any areas that they felt the guidelines had some problems, needed to be changed and updated, and provide those and respond back to the state. And also to start looking at potential areas for the district. In addition to that, that committee came up with some guiding principles for what the district should look like. And that included what they wanted to do was preserve neighborhood character, walkability, and promote that. They wanted to see the districts located where there were amenities and services available, and also in consistent with the state guidelines to locate them near areas that were closer to transportation corridors or not too far from those neighboring transit stations. And they also wanted to see some preservation. They wanted to see the commercial areas preserved and try to encourage some commercial development. So they identified 8 potential areas. Several of those were eliminated early on because they were inconsistent with housing and livable community guidelines, such as, for example, shovel work seemed to be a perfect area to start with and include in a district, but it has a preservation restriction. So there would be special permits and special restrictions applied to any development or redevelopment in that area, and that was not acceptable to the guidelines. And then also, you know, we looked at the distance to services and transportation options, and that eliminated some of those other areas. And what it came down to was a focus on 3 suitable areas that were closer to services and transportation options. And several of those areas already had existing multifamily housing. So what you'll see here is, is you have, this is Avalon over off Robert Drive. This is Highland Plaza. This is the warehouse. So this was one of the sub-districts that was being considered and looked at as a potential opportunity. We have Roach Brothers Plaza here and looking at this area. And then the other area that was being considered was Belmont and Washington Street. So again, from that 8, it was narrowed down to those 3. And these are the 3 I believe we showed at the meeting in February. So based on all those meetings that we had a special meeting with the Furnace Village Neighborhood Collaborative Group. that those are the folks that live along Foundry Street. They had started coming to the meetings early on. They were very concerned about increased traffic in their area, that most of the new development that's going on in town is happening in that area. And part of that's by design, through the zoning and the investments in the new sewer and infrastructure. They also felt that the town really needed to make sure that there were other parts of town that were included in the district. And again, there were some really good and altruistic reasons for that. If you're providing multifamily housing and you're providing it in areas that are closer to transportation opportunities or areas where people can work, shop, and have recreation opportunities, you want to make sure that those are areas that you're looking at. We had strong interest in the Belmont, Washington area, the one I just showed you, from property owners in that area that were supportive of the zoning and that have properties, but also would like to redevelop properties with multifamily housing. And then generally what we heard from people is don't oversize the district or capacity. Don't try to do everything all at once. Let's comply with what's required and hit those minimums and go from there. And we heard from a few people that they felt the districts were too small. They would have liked to have seen them be a little larger and provide more opportunity for the housing. So this is after the planning board met, took that feedback into consideration. The districts that they came up with were comprised of areas within the 3 that I showed you previously. This is Robert Drive, but it only includes the Avalon Plaza, complex. It does not include the other properties. On the Belmont, Washington area, they took out the parcels over along Washington Street and kept these parcels in. And I had mentioned back in February that we have some multifamily housing that already exists there. These properties do include the properties where the developers would like to build some multifamily housing. So that seemed to make a lot of sense. And again, both of these areas are still in areas that are close to shopping and work opportunities. And again, Robert Drive is about 4 miles from the Mansfield train station. Belmont Street is about 3 miles from the downtown station in Brockton. And then we have the Roach Brothers Way, which was reduced to just the area to the west of Washington Street. Sorry. So in total, these add up to 65 acres. We have to have a minimum of 50 and 972 units. I had someone ask in the Economic Development Council why the town didn't get it right down to 913 and to 50 acres. The explanation is that there's a complex formula that the state uses to determine if your districts comply. And it takes into consideration restricted land that wouldn't be used, the setbacks and everything. And if you try picking out just 1 or 2 parcels here or there, you quickly get below or very close to the 913 or the 50 acres and make it likely that it won't pass with the state. But this was really felt as a reasonable number to come back to. So the requested action tonight is we're asking you to vote to recommend.
I love this slide. This helps me because I never know what we're doing. So this is great. Thank you, Stephanie. Questions, comments, thoughts on...
Hey, Stephanie, real quick question on the previous slide there, the one up by Roach Brothers.
Yes.
Is it correct that at this stage, South Coast Rail is pretty much dead along that right
I
away?
think most of us feel it is very unlikely that that will move forward or any time in
A century?
future. Yes. I mean, they're spending all this money on the spur. It seems unlikely that that will be resurrected.
I was curious. And
Yes,
this is all clear then, right?
in the event that it is, then we will at least have started a district in that area because it would bump Easton to a different category as an MBTA proper state community.
Got it. And we're talking all three of these, right? All three of these total up to the.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome. Wonderful.
And
Thanks.
the only question I had on that was that the South Coast Rail was the complete extension, right? That's like going all the way down to, I can't remember which city
Fall River.
Fall River.
Down to Fall River. But
Yeah.
there was a separate, the stub or the other stub line that you mentioned. Where is that one going to? What's the extension?
That goes to Taunton. That runs from Middleborough to Taunton, and then from Taunton, they're going to extend the rail or revitalize the rail down to New Bedford and Fall River.
Got it. So the reading between the lines, there's little chance, even if the South Coast Rail project is done, Stoughton still seems like the last stop on that MBTA sort of commuter rail line for the near, to take Mike's term, future century or so.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Wait, sorry, before I punt it. All the presentations, all the obvious, for lack of a better term, marketing of this process, this comes to a head at town meeting where the overlay vote, just to make it clear for anyone who tunes in to this thrilling Patrick Helen stand-up session, is acceptance of the overlay districts itself. You've said it well before, it does not require said construction, but if presentations are presented, then this is part of the configuration for it. And so town meeting, step one, any subsequent construction or projects or any proposed processes for these various different overlays would then still go through the same measures and methods that are with any and other all construction projects.
All by right construction projects. So larger projects, commercial projects, this type of development would need to go through the planning board for site plan review. It's not a permit, but it is a process where the applicant has to, they have to apply with the board. They have to submit their plans. The board has some standards by which they review the project. As I said earlier, that generally includes ensuring that the circulation into and then around the project is safe and reasonable, making sure that the butters have a proper buffer between the project and their properties. And there can be some architectural oversight. Mm-hmm. The planning board would need to adopt some design standards in order to be able to act in that way. And just one other thing I wanted to add, Patrick, I've done this so many times. When I talked about the comments that the implementation review team provided, one of the things, the initial guidelines did not allow a community to have an affordability requirement. And that really bothered a lot of communities, including Easton. Easton has worked very hard to get its to the 10%, the 40B 10% subsidized housing inventory, and to keep at 10%, both for the ability to control projects, but also to ensure that there's affordable housing in the community. To not be able to require that just seemed anathema to the goals that we've been striving for. And that feedback was provided. The state did come back and they do allow a 10% affordability requirement when a project is proposing 10 or more units. So that is part of the zoning in Easton's proposed districts.
Excellent. Great call up.
Let me ask Stephanie, because that raises a good question. So is it a mandatory 10% when anyone comes in? Is that our minimum? for
10%.
anything?
It's the maximum that the state allows. You
It's the
can,
maximum.
yes, if you could demonstrate through a fiscal analysis that your district could support a higher affordability percentage, you could impose that. We did contract with a qualified consultant who did that analysis for us, and they did not find that ours could support it. And in fact, they've been doing these for a number of communities, and I think there's only one community that they found, and it's probably more densely populated than Easton, and so it's very difficult to rise above that 10%.
So what's the total acreage between the three sites?
It is 65 acres.
Acres, you were saying?
65 in total. And 972 units based on the way the zoning is constructed. And again, the
From
town.
an outsider looking at,
No, go ahead.
no, I was just saying from just looking, I don't live over near the Eastern Foundry District, but I think that's a model that actually works because you do have a lot of amenities, and is it not the largest multifamily development in town?
It is.
Avalon?
It is.
And how has that worked so far? From outside looking in, it looks like it's a success. I know people have raised issues about.
They are the biggest taxpayer in Easton, so it's generating revenue for the town. They do generate. I mean, you think about this, and Tim can probably or might be able to speak a little bit, but you do get more public safety calls, but you have more people in a condensed area, living in a condensed area, so you can expect that. The number of school-aged children, because that you can't zone against education and children, but that is a concern people have. And in total, for all the multifamily housing that's been constructed in Easton over the last 12 years, that includes Avalon, Shovel Works, 244 Washington Street, it's generated 100 new students into the school system, which is the school population is around 3,600. So, so, and then from a financial aspect, I was just talking with someone today who has property, commercial property over there, and it's been a boon to their businesses. The challenge they're having for the businesses now is hiring people. That's one of the biggest problems our businesses are facing in Easton, is that they can't find people to work. And part of the problem is the cost of living in Easton and even just in the communities outside of Easton.
Agreed. I guess my point is, as I said, from the outside or just a 10,000 observation, I think Eastman Foundry and that model works. Is there a way in which we can duplicate that? And it should be easy in the North Washington Roach Brother Plaza, because there is a lot of acreage there, I would assume. But I guess my overall point is seeing how it has to go to the planning board. This does not require any going to zoning and getting a variance, does it?
No.
Any variances? That's
no, it would not qualify. It would meet the guideline.
So the key here is, I think, right, for just from my view, since it is in the planning board's preview, purview, authorization, to look at that model that has been successful and best practices, which you guys probably have, and just duplicate that in these areas. I think this is fantastic. I'm one that would increase it, but this is just my opinion. I don't want to offer my opinion. I think you know how I feel about affordable housing. So
yes. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Robert. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Brian, go for it.
do. I'm going to try to word this, and I'm just trying to work it through my head, so I apologize. as clean as I think it would. But Stephanie, with all the news about this process, not only in Easton but various other communities, of course, you have a lot of online chatter about the land maybe just being an overlay district now, and people are saying it'll never be built up or it may not be built up. But there's always this snicker of course they're saying that, and it's going to be population boom, right? How have you addressed those types of inquiries in the various public hearings that you've had? What has been that feedback from potential naysayers or the skeptics of how truthful the town might be in going through this process? And on the flip side, with the other legal challenges that other communities are putting up to the mandate, what is kind of your talking points on that stuff?
So
that was clear.
We're as far as the other, like Milton,
yeah,
and what they're going through. This is Easton, and
right.
and maybe, and again, that's part of. I've been working with the chair of the planning board on the presentation, and he really wanted to start out with the impact of not receiving those grants and not being eligible for those grants, because maybe other communities, they can afford to turn their back on those grant opportunities, but Easton has really benefited from it. And when you look at the size of the projects, these grants were kind of like the but for the last dollar, but for, and it really helped ensure that they move forward, and reduce betterment costs to the folks in the Furnace Village district. So, that's one thing. As far as that it will never be built, personally, I'm more, as a planner, I think like Bob's thinking, that people need housing. People in Easton are finding it difficult to stay in Easton. People are finding it difficult to come to Easton. And what happens is not everyone is going to want to live in multifamily housing. A lot of folks still want single family homes. But when you increase the housing stock and the housing options, you presumably over time it should help drive costs down, or at least stabilize costs so that people can come. So personally, I would have liked, like Bob was saying, I would have loved to have seen the Eastman Foundry District larger. And it would not be able to be built to that full 15 units per acre capacity unless it was redeveloped. And the Avalon is not going to redevelop. They built here because they felt that Easton was the right place for this type of project for them. And they keep their projects. This is what they do. They manage them and they keep them for a long time. They're not going to redevelop that. It's not likely that Target or the Plaza are going to redevelop. They have a captive audience now. They have a captive market. You see with Starbucks moved there after they built, after Avalon came. So I think that people will continue to say, oh, that's what you say, and it's going to build up. I don't see that happening. That the properties here, other than the one on Belmont Street, which again the developers said we would like to do some development there. You're not going to see I want to say it's a boom in developing these areas.
You're not.
No, thank you for that, and I'm with you both, right? I agree that affordable housing is integral to any type of future for this town, and it's a very important one. I'm at that age where I was lucky enough to get into homes before people a generation after me are starting to struggle to do the same. So it's close to my heart for sure. I was really just trying to address the kind of the keyboard warriors out there who are
Yeah.
looking at this and saying, well, Milton's not going to do it, we shouldn't do it either, right?
Right.
And I know that we're
Yep.
not the same communities, and I want to make sure that we at the finance committee are just not rubber stamping something, that we are actually asking these types of questions on behalf of those naysayers and just making sure that, hey, this is truly the right thing for Easton, and others can do what they want to do.
Yeah, and I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer them. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Two quick questions, Stephanie. One is sound like a weird question in a way, I guess, but has anybody expressed a specific interest to build this type of housing in a different location than what we're looking at here?
The short answer is yes. I have been approached about potential, people who might potentially, and I'm not going to name the properties or anything because, it's really very high level, and I don't even know if anything's at this point moving forward. But in other areas, that where they feel there's land and they could do that. Of course, another part of this is Easton's kind of constrained by its land because of the amount of land that's wet.
Right.
But yes.
And my reason for asking was, are there any, trying to phrase this the right way, and I apologize, or frame it the right way. Is there anything in how we have selected these three locations that precludes essentially building? In other words, is there anything here where it's like, oh, we chose these because nobody wants to build here, as opposed to somewhere where somebody does want to build?
So the answer is no. These weren't chosen because we thought nobody would want to build here. And again,
that's what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's a strange question. It was just the counter case popped into my head as we were talking. So, and I get it. There's always somebody who says they want to build somewhere else, but I was just curious about that one. The one other question is there anything to, and maybe this is more about the law and irrelevant to the topic at hand, which is the zoning of these three specific areas. But is there anything in the law or in how we're approaching it that would exclude any predatory builders? So any corporate interests that are arguably a part of the reason housing prices have been driven up? Or does this just simply not address that in any meaningful way, which is fine?
Well, so I think from my knowledge of, people who are coming in and purchasing low and flipping high, I think two things. One, I don't think the areas are either large enough or that there would be enough of a return or enough properties to kind of type of properties that you just buy and either demolish and rebuild with a more expensive product.
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it's probably even an unfair question in a lot of ways. Just there's so many folks out there right now that are, it's mostly from my limited understanding is in the single family home space, but there's a lot of buying properties like private equity and venture capital. And then essentially what that's doing is both bidding up the value and then bidding up rents. And obviously the goal of this is to bring down housing costs and make things more affordable. I was just curious if there was something in there that protected
I would think that if Easton, if it were a community where you had a lot of like traditional multifamily, the triple deckers, right?
Yeah.
Someone coming in could buy up a block of those and do that, but Easton doesn't have that kind of housing stock,
right?
That would lend itself to that.
Yeah, great point. Well, thank you so much. I know, weird questions for me. Sorry.
No, I think these are great questions.
It's not weird at all, Mike. I think you're spot on. There's a recent stat, because I follow this pretty closely, where corporations and kind of dark corporations and these hidden landlords are just soaking up markets and getting all these properties on, and people are just going to be renters for the rest of their lives. And I think some of the naysayers may be quietly worried about that too, where they're not going to be able to own a property themselves. They're going to have to pay rent if we have all these, wonderful new spots out and down to build stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things that I heard from folks, some of the folks who are getting older and have homes in Easton and want to stay and age in place, and they would like to be able to sell their property. And in most cases, they can probably sell it for a lot more than what they bought it for, but they'd like to, maybe they probably aren't interested, or they've expressed that they're not interested in rental, but they would like to be able to downsize into something smaller that they own, and the condominiums are a real option. So this is multifamily, and condominiums are a multifamily option. So it could be someone could come in, and if it makes economic sense for them, that they would build townhouses. And that would certainly be a housing type that we hear is there's a lot of interest in.
Stephanie, let me ask, that's not the traditional type of developers that usually develop in Easton, though? You're talking about those that look like Avalon, walk like Avalon, the Trinities, the other ones, the other big private companies. These all have to pencil out for them. And,
right.
I can tell you now, for the last 2 years, developers have put their pencils down because of the high interest rate.
Yeah.
In order for these to pencil out, you have to have the density. And that's
Yeah.
why I say
Yes.
to the better. I thought, Mike, your question was really good. It caught me off guard, but it was a really good question. Just in regards to, I don't think, and I assumed that our planning department didn't go the approach of let's find sites that nobody will develop in. Just by the sites that they chose, the fact that Roach Brothers in the Belmont Street, I think, has a lot of opportunity there. I thought I didn't think of that, so I thought that was a pretty good question from a very.
And Stephanie, I wasn't suggesting that that you had. Let's not take it that way. It's a good
question. I mean, and so I think you're going to get those big multifamily developers that are interested, because of the reality is, I don't think the prices are ever going to go down. What I'm hoping is that they stabilize, rent stabilize, acquisition of either condos or co-ops stabilize. Prices never go down. Interest rate, I hope, goes down. Inflation didn't go down, so I'm just hoping that we do get quality. And it's the planning boards that really have to vet these type of developments. And I think this is new to the planning board, just like it's new to everybody. Well, not everybody, everybody in Easton, a lot of folks in Easton. I've seen these all over the place, but.
Thank you all for the great questions and the discussion. Anything else before we move to a vote?
Motion to recommend to Petro.
Seconded by Jenkins.
She was going for the mute button.
I got stuck.
You're doing it.
I wanted that one.
DiNardo.
DiNardo is a yes, and thank you again, Stephanie. Very insightful and very.
You're welcome.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Kumosi.
Mosey's yes.
I'm a yes. I'm echoing the thank you. And Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes. Definitely good presentation.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so that takes us through our warrant articles, except for the ones for the joint meeting. So we can close out that.
All right, I'm going to say good night to everybody. Good night.
You are good to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks.
I think we do the same with Wendy as well.
We need Wendy for 2 more quick things.
So actually, before we get off the warrant articles, one of the things in talking to Connor is that, he's presented the preliminary budget and the budget change memos to the select board. But we haven't really come to finance committee and presented that information. Did you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I have 1 and 2 open. I figured it would be something. Well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we didn't call it out as part of the agenda, so I don't know if there's any conflict there.
It could be a discussion as part of the budget article, just
Yeah.
a sort of status update on where we are with that article. If you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That sounds good. Yeah, let me, so budget change 1 was that was delivered on March 25th, and then budget change 2 was the most recent one, which was April 8th, correct?
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess my thought is that this is, oh, good, you have them. Fantastic. This is something that's never really been floated to FinCom. We've been expected, obviously, look at it ourselves, and then if there were questions, to raise it in the context of the joint meeting. But by then, it's sort of set. So, yeah, happy to discuss.
Great. All right. So I just wanted to kind of go through like where we were at the process. All right. So initially, the preliminary budget came out all right, in February. And at that time, we started out with probably one of the highest, preliminary deficits that we've seen in a long time, right? So just if you scroll down to the bottom here, I mean, the preliminary deficit was $3.2 million. Usually it's around like 1.9 or, closer to 2. And, there's been a few reasons for that. There's just a lot of different things sort of happening at the same time. Our fixed costs have definitely gone up a lot more this year than they have in previous years. Again, the state aid has also, at least, we started out with the governor's budget, which was very minimal. State aid was only going to, was looking at, for Chapter 70, minimum aid was set at $30, an additional $30 per student in the governor's budget. I do have a little good news on that, which I'll get to. But that's sort of where we started there. And unrestricted general government aid, those are the 2 biggest categories of state aid, was going to go up by 3% in the governor's budget. So that's what we put in here. And our local receipts, we always start out at a sort of modest increase for that. So we plugged in 7.9 million for that, and using some other funds here. Also, ARPA funds, that revenue loss money that we did get. This is fiscal 25 is going to be the last year of that. In the past 2 years, we've been able to put 750,000 toward that. But in fiscal 25, we're going to use, what's left over, which is 430,000, and we'll put that into the budget. Following year, that's going to be gone. But at least we do have some of that this fiscal year. As far as free cash, we put in $1,170,000 for that, which is basically, if you look at fiscal 24, we had 750 in ARPA and we had 850 in free cash. So basically the 430 and the 1170 equal that same total. So there was a little bit of an increase in free cash for that. And then this just lists some of the fixed cost categories: exempt debt, non-exempt debt, employee benefits and insurance. The regional and county school assessments, that was definitely a larger increase, 22% over the previous year. What accounts for that basically is there was a spike in enrollment at the regional school. So that's what's contributing to that increase there. We actually lucked out because, like, if you look at 24, the assessment dipped down from 1,500,000 to 1,300,000 because the enrollment went down significantly, but then it basically popped back up in fiscal 25. So those are your fixed costs. Town budget, initial budget requests came in, certainly a lot higher than what our revenue increase was looking at. So initially, our revenue picture, this 2.93%, that's what we were looking at for revenue growth over the previous year. But expenses were coming in overall at about 6.41%. So that's where you get that deficit of 3.2 million. We've since issued Budget Change Memo 1, where we sharpened our pencils, we increased some of our revenue estimates, and also some of our expenses were cut as well. One of the things you'll notice, so exempt debt went up by 438,000. That's debt on the Public Safety Public Works project. So that basically is budget neutral, because as you increase the revenue here, you're going to increase the exempt debt down here as well. But we got those figures in, and we wanted to program that into the budget.
Wendy,
Yes.
just a quick question. When you do that, is that accounting operating standards to do that, to exempt that debt from your overall budget? That's acceptable practice?
Yes.
I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's excludable debt. So all the excludable debt, it's you basically take what your debt service requirements are going to be for that fiscal year, and you add that on top of your tax levy, because it's outside the constraints of Prop 2.5.
Okay.
We added 100,000 in the Ames funds category. So the Ames funds, we're an income beneficiary of several Ames funds that benefit the schools and the highways of Easton. And we definitely get money every year for that, but it can vary depending on how the rates of return were on the investments. So we project that like we do any other income. And we had put in a more conservative estimate to start, but a lot of times we will project we'll budget one amount, but we usually get a little bit more. So there's a little bit more built up, and we're applying that toward the budget. So that's what that 100,000 was, which we then in Budget Change Memo 2, you're going to see another 128,000. We're just using more of that money. So then if you go down here, we cut 170,000 out of employee benefits and insurance, based on incentives that we're going to offer, opt-out incentives and incentives to switch to other programs. We also basically narrowed some of the margins that we use when we look at. Every year we look at what the current enrollment is, and then we add some projections in for increases in enrollment during the year. So we're usually a little bit more liberal with that, and we had to sharpen that number as well. So we reduced that by 170,000. And then we cut another 100,000 out of this overlay / snow and ice deficit. So overlay, it's one of those unique municipal terms. It's basically an allowance that we set aside for abatements and exemptions for real estate taxes. And we have to set that aside like an expense, although we don't vote it at town meeting. And also the snow and ice deficit was in there. So we had put in 100,000 for that. At this point, we don't need that. Looks like we fortunately are not going to exceed that budget. So we took that out. And then we also sharpened the pencils for the town operating budgets and reduced those by 317,000. So that brought the deficit down to 2.5 million, which is still pretty significant. And then in Budget Change Memo 2, we also looked at, we took a closer look at some of our revenue amounts. that we could put toward the budget. So you'll see there's no adjustments to expenses, all on the revenue side. We added an additional increase in our estimate for new growth, and that's based on the fact that for the Shovelworks property, the TIF that we've had is going to expire at the end of this fiscal year. So that property will be fully taxed next year. That will increase our growth. So based on discussions with assessing and our consultants that we use to do the commercial and industrial property valuations, they felt that 200,000 was probably a safe number. We're hoping we can get maybe a little bit more than that, but we feel that 200,000 would be attainable for that property. Also going down to the Ames funds, 28,000. That's just an accumulation of what we've accumulated over the years, basically, for schools and highways. Last year we got about I think we got 540,000 in total, which is why we had increased the estimate from 400 to 500,000. And then this 128 is basically what we have sitting in the fund now that we can use also towards next year. But we don't expect that will recur in fiscal 26. We also programmed in opioid settlement funds. There's a lot of services that we currently provide that would qualify under using those settlement monies. And so in order to preserve those services, we're going to program 150,000 of those settlement funds into the budget. And we should be able to do that for several years.
Is that something we apply for, Wendy, or is that something, how do you access that opioid settlement funds? How do you access them?
So a lot of communities, because of all of the lawsuits, are getting settlement funds. It's happening in communities all over the state. We've received so far, I think, over 400,000. And the companies that are held responsible, I think they can choose to either make a lump sum payment up front, or they can spread those payments out over the several years. And I don't have the exact breakdown, but it's numerous organizations that have to pay these settlement fees.
So I understand that, but how do we access that? Is that it's not a given, is it? Or is it a fixed number, or how do you apply for it? Or they just don't send you a check, do they?
Well, they have been actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Kristen Kennedy probably knows more about how that all works. I think there's some kind of portal too that she can get into and see like what's coming and what's due to be distributed to us. But yeah, so currently we already have about 400,000 that we have already received, and it's in us like a special separate fund. So we would just use 150 of that.
Okay.
Right. Septic loan receipts, that's basically the septic loan program that we have. People are able to basically get loans from the town to repair their septic system or tie into sewer, and they pay back that loan through betterments on their property. Those betterment payments go into what's called a special like receipts reserve for appropriation account. So they accumulate in that particular fund, but we pay the debt service out of the general fund. So this 262 represents the amount of debt that we would have to pay out of the general fund, and we transfer that money out of that fund to cover it. Water indirect costs, and then we have other, which is going to be, there's some revolving funds that we're going to use to also help offset some of the costs in the budget. We did 35,000 last year from some planning conservation accounts, and that will also recur. We did increase our free cash usage, and this would be the first year that we would be really drawing significantly off of the stabilization fund. And then in doing that, it brought the deficit down to 705,000. So that's where we're at now. We're working to get the town budget totals. Right now, they're at 4.94%. Over fiscal 24, we're looking to get that down to 4%. The school department, the superintendent presented her budget to the school committee the other night, and right now their budget request is actually currently at 5.78%. So we'll be working together to achieve that balanced budget in time for the hearings. And also one thing I wanted to mention too is that the state budget, the House Ways and Means budget, just came out yesterday. And I just got, as this meeting was going on, an email from the Department of Revenue giving us revised state aid numbers, which we will also plug in and incorporate that into the final budget change memo number 3 that will show a balanced budget. Some key things from the House budget is they increased minimum aid from $30 a student to $104 a student.
Holy.
Which is fantastic. I hope that holds. They did, on the flip side, reduce the increase in the UGA money, or the unrestricted general government aid, from a 3% increase to a 1% increase. But the gains we made in Chapter 70 far outweigh that cut. Mm-hmm. It's a much smaller revenue component. So it's like 2.6 million versus 10 million. So that it's probably going to be about a $50,000 cut. So that's not bad at all. We'll take that.
Take it out of the finance committee fund. There you go. Done. This is great.
So we'll be coming out with that. But the other thing I wanted to just kind of mention is, I mean, if you look at our revenue, like initially, and even if you look at fiscal 24, the growth over the previous year, 3.3%. And then you've got, initially it was 2.93%. It went up to 3.58, and here it's at 5.51, but that's because we had to bolster it with reserves. Our problem has been and continues to be, and I know Connor said structural revenue deficit a lot, but it really is a revenue problem that we have, mostly because of being a minimum aid community. When your state aid grows by such small amounts, it really increases your reliance on taxation, which is limited because of Prop 2.5, and local receipts, even if they do pretty well, they're still just a small piece of the pie in comparison to the total.
Sure.
So
that kind of raises a good question, though, Wendy, because you talked about, and I've talked to a number of communities that say in the next year and a half they can't sustain their budgets. They're looking at 2.5 overrides. Mm-hmm. I don't want us to be in that position. How do we?
I mean,
how do we forecast? How do we put in, I guess, flags, or do we? I mean, the revenue and ours is based really on our tax base, which is a small percentage. How do we? I mean, I don't know. How do we mitigate getting to that point?
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that we tried to do that. I mean, the last override that we had was in 2006 for fiscal 2007, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've made that last for a long time. It probably would have we probably would have gotten even more benefit out of it if we didn't have that whole, the Great Recession, because a year after that, they cut our state aid, and that really impacted, if we didn't have that operating override, I don't know what we would have done. It would have been so devastating, but the gains that we made from having that override were really eroded from those cuts to state aid, and that general unrestricted aid has never recovered since then. I mean, we used to get more aid than what we get now. So it's definitely a balancing act. I mean, we've done a lot of things. And when I say we, I mean, it's more like, Connor has done a lot of things. Like, we've done things with, energy efficiency. We joined the GIC, and that helped us. Regionalizing our dispatch. Those are all things that have saved us money, over the years, that have allowed us to continue on without, needing to do something like that. Next year it's tough, especially with some of this federal money expiring. We're not in as bad a shape as a lot of other communities out there right now, but we will have to, make some decisions down the road. We're going to do what we can, obviously. I mean,
those other communities don't have you, Wendy.
Or Connor.
Connor.
But
okay. Yeah, I just know a lot of communities I talk to, especially in Metro West. I mean, they're looking at the next year. This year is tough, and next year is going to be worse. So.
We did fund some things out of ARPA, but not to the extent that maybe some other communities did, where now that money is going away, it's
right.
Extremely devastating. It's a balancing act, right? So we have to balance, what do we want to preserve for services? Our services are important. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to raid all our reserves either. So, right now we've been building up our reserves for times like this. So this will get us through probably for the next, couple of years. But, we're going to have to, if we don't get any other forms of revenue or significant growth, then, we'll have to make some tough choices.
Yeah.
So,
but good job. Yeah, good job. It looks good. We'll balance it, I'm sure.
We'll balance it, and balancing it, doesn't come without, issues down the road. I mean, we've cut some expense budgets that really have not grown over the last few years, and now with inflation, that limits, it limits any like cushion you have for unanticipated things. Right. But it also limits what you can do with that money, because everything costs so much more now. So, but we'll get the budget balanced. This was definitely some good news in this latest iteration of the budget. So, like I said, we're gonna put that in. We're gonna get the budget balanced and get that change memo 3 out so that we can then present a balanced budget article for town meeting in the warrant. So.
Excellent.
That's all I have for that. If there's any other questions, or we can move on to the transfers.
Any questions on the change memorandum 1 and 2?
Thank you, Wendy. Very insightful. It's certainly paying attention for the last 2 years. This is not new.
All right. Seeing no other questions, I don't know which ones I opened first. We have the 2 reserve fund transfers. The first one I have is for postage. And the second one is the plumbing and gas inspector, etc. Do you have any preference on which way you go through them?
I mean, we could start with the postage one. I have that one up.
Sorry, I was pulling it up myself. Okay, yeah, let's go through it.
So we are looking for a request of $7,000 right now, our postage meter is actually, the account is overdrawn. It's part of the other general government budget, so that budget as a whole is not overdrawn, but that particular line item is. And you know, we had a shortfall. We definitely did more in terms of mailings and everything this year. And then also there was an increase in postage. So that's, you know, basically like where we're at with that. So 7,000 could definitely get us to the end of the fiscal year. Basically, when we the way we do it at Town Hall is we have a postage meter in Town Hall. We usually it's through Pitney Bowes. They have this reserve account. We usually do it in like $5,000 increments, and we send the check to Pitney Bowes. They set up this like reserve account, and then basically we move over probably like $1,000 like at a time from the reserve account to the actual like meter that's in Town Hall. We don't do it all at once because one time one of the repair people told us, you know, if you move all the money in the meter and there's a problem with the meter, like the money's gone. So, but we want to, you know, we always want to have it because it takes time to, you know, cut a check and then get the money to them. And so we always want to make sure that we don't run out of postage. So, and at this point, you know, we're already in April, but we still have, you know, a few months to go before the end of the fiscal year. And we, you know, all the checks that we mail out, all the mailings from Town Hall, they all go through that postage meter. So, so we would be requesting the 7,000 for that.
Any questions, comments, or discussion on this reserve request?
Motion to approve the reserve request to Petro.
Transfer from the reserve fund.
Seconded by Jenkins.
DiNardo.
DiNardo is a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Mosi.
Mosi is yes.
And Helen is a yes, and Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
You. All right, so now on to the plumbing and inspecting and whatnot.
Okay, so inspectional services budget, they have a couple of positions that are per diem. So the plumbing and gas inspector, alternate gas inspector, alternate wiring inspector, they all get paid per inspection. And so it's not like they have, you know, set amount of hours every week and you can, you know, really accurately predict how much that expense is going to be in a fiscal year. They get paid per inspection. I'm happy to report that our inspections are up. Our revenue is actually looking pretty good right now. In fact, licenses and permits year to date right now, we're at 924,000, which is great because we only budgeted 756,000. And last year we took in 875,000. So we've already exceeded what we took in last year, which is great. So with that comes more inspections. And as you can see, these particular line items are already running short. I believe when we earlier when I came forward with the town clerk reserve fund transfer request, that I had mentioned that this was probably going to be next in line. And now we're at a point where we do need additional funds for those lines. And I hope this will get us to the end of the fiscal year, but it's possible that there could be a last minute transfer. Particularly these people that do the inspections, we don't pay them every week either. So a lot of times you get, we pay them like once or twice a month. So those inspections can add up, and sometimes we just don't know how much they're going to be until, you know, we get the payroll for that time period.
As someone who had to have an alternate off hours vacation weekend inspection, I think this is the greatest article or reserve transfer fund of all time, because we were looking down a 3-day weekend with no heat if the delightful human that is doing the inspections hadn't shown up. So that's not an endorsement or a force, but huge fan, Wendy, huge fan. Any questions or thoughts on this one? Oh, Brian, go ahead.
This is yeah. I'm just so you're potentially 200 over what you budgeted. This is offset by that potential overage. You're waiting for that cash flow to come in before, essentially, right?
So in terms of cash flow, well, the permit revenue is just, it goes into the general fund, so it doesn't go
Okay.
to the budget. But it'll become, the extra revenue that we get will become part of our free cash certification.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Any other thoughts or comments on plumbing, wiring, etc. reserve fund transfer?
Motion to transfer the funds to Petra.
Seconded by Jenkins.
You, DiNardo,
Nardo is a yes.
Napoli,
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro,
Petra, yes.
Olson,
Olson, yes.
Mosi.
Mosey's yes.
I am a yes, and Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
Excellent. All right, that's that one. Wendy, is that all the business we have with you tonight? Is that
I think we have completed our business for tonight.
ready? We are clear and good for you then. So, Wendy, thank you so much. Great to
Thank
see
you,
You know
Wendy.
what? Just stay for the minutes.
Thanks,
That's the
Wendy.
fun part.
See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your support.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too.
All right, I'll really quick housekeeping items that I just had to put on the agenda so we could talk through them. First and foremost, there is some departmental assignment stuff that needs to be shifted around. For those of you who do not know, even though I've made a joke of it like 16 times tonight, our established greatest EMS and COVID champion of all time, Tim Vamosi, has moved out of town, the traitor, and has taken an amazing new opportunity in a different town. So the FinCom is now significantly worse than it will ever be because we're losing the captain of captains. There's also some other news of, I won't go into it just because I don't know how much we should go into it, but there's some job changes that have happened in some people on the committee that then potentially are probably the wrong department for you to be associated with. So the point behind all of this is not a deliberation conversation for tonight, but we have an election coming up. Tim is departing. There are some people that are in the need of switching departments. We are going to bring this up to the next meeting. For those of you who do not already have it, I will reshare the department list that we have, essentially the assigned departments for you to have your communications with. And then we will go and make the decisions, make the discussions about who wants to be assigned to what. That will then include the variety of different benefits of the DPW, etc. On the same note, part of the conversation that I've had with a few people in town around Tim's seat is that as of right now, I don't believe anyone's pulled papers. I don't think anyone has qualified or raised their hand for a write-in candidate. So if anyone does know of anyone who would love to join this delightful circus, please feel free to send them my way if they want to get more information. Danielle from the town clerk's office is happy to, I spoke to her, she's happy to obviously give people an understanding of what a write-in process looks like. If not, if it's an appointment post-election, same process applies, like if you have someone that's interested. And so to finalize this statement, I just want to say a huge heartfelt thank you to Mr. Vamosi, right? You've been on this, is this your 7th year, 6th year? I don't even know. 5th year?
7th year.
7th year. You've been here as long as I have, essentially, right? I think you came on board as an appointment my first year, and it has been an honor and a privilege to work with you. You have been exactly what we've needed the entire time. It is our massive loss and that now Evil Islands gain that we are losing you to the offshore benefits. So thank you so much again. Just huge thank you.
Tim, thank you.
All right, let me jump in there and just say practically the same thing that Tim. I think you and I had our elections together the first go round when I joined. I had no idea who the hell you were, and you get on one of these committees and you're like, who are these people? Are they going to be nice to me? I just got to say, the work we've done here and watching the work you've done for our community, all I can do is tip my hat. I mean, I'm a wise ass joker on this, and I sit here in awe of you showing up and just doing an amazing job. And Yeah, I agree with Patrick. Gonna miss you. And why wasn't I consulted? I would have told you you weren't allowed to go.
Yeah,
Damn
no,
it.
I had the same statement. I also said that if the FinCom had a room, we would try to name it after you, but unfortunately we are devoid of said real estate. But fingers crossed, right? There's always the future. The Captain Boardroom sounds like it has a good ring. Anyone else wanna make Vimosi blush before I move on to our last and final piece here?
Tim, when is your last day on FinCom? Or in the
It'll be the election. April 20th would be my last official day on FinCom, but tonight will probably most likely be my last meeting.
I'm so glad when you accepted, I was like, yes, I get to make him feel ridiculous. This is gonna be great.
No, but if I can make a statement too, because I'm leaving, I think I get that privilege, right? Is that how that works?
I mean, I'll allow it this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mike does not get that same privilege.
It is your
FYI.
committee.
When DePietro leaves, we're not extending that whatsoever.
Perfect. No, but I just wanted to say thank you to this committee, thank you to the select board, our constituents, the residents of Easton, my family especially, for allowing me to do this over the past 7 years. I think, like many of us who join these committees, you don't know what you're getting into when you get into it. But I've never been so humbled as to when you go to an election and you watch people walk in and out of that booth and you see your name at the end of it. The people putting their faith in me to help the decisions of their purse over the past 7 years. And what is 7 years, right? I mean, we talked about COVID, we talked about sewer projects, we've talked about school projects, municipal building projects, and doing all of that, watching it go from spreadsheet to sketch to actual building. And now seeing families going through those buildings and growing their families like I had the opportunity to do in Easton is just an incredible journey. So my advice to anybody out there who might be watching this recording later is to jump on that committee, put your name out there and get on something like this, because it really has been a fantastic journey. So I thank you to this committee. Thank you to our town administrator and administration for being so helpful throughout the years. And again, just a big shout out to my family for letting me stay on here till 9:30 at night with you guys to make
One last time.
So exactly. So it's been fantastic.
Can I just say,
Thank
after
you,
that
Tim.
speech, why the hell am I the chairman of this committee? I'm just going to throw that out there yet again. Thank you, Tim.
Also,
You're
I'd also like to
a
make
credit to everybody.
make a request too that Tim gets to fill the Mike DePietro role for the last vote on the minutes.
Oh yeah. I think that's highly appropriate. So
Very
let's do it, right? So we have one last item on our checklist here, which is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from January 24th, 2024. Can I get a motion to well, actually, is there any deliberation or discussion or edits to those minutes? It's 9:27, so I doubted there would be. I see none. Can I get a motion to accept the meeting minutes from that date?
motion to accept.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mosi's going to second. Your big one's coming up. DiNardo.
Narrow is a yes.
DiNapoli.
DiNapoli is a yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Mosi.
For most yes.
I am a yes. And Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
Double check I'm not leaving anything on the table here that I forgot about in my agenda. Where are we? No, we should be good. With that, I'm looking at you, Captain Captain, to get us out of here. Do I have a motion that might do a good job of getting us out of this meeting?
So thank you again to everybody, and motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
DiNardo.
Narrow is a yes.
Napoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes. And thanks, Tim.
I am a yes. Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes. Tim, it's been
Yeah.
nice working with you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
With the last vote.
Vimosi is a yes. Thank you again.
Good night, man. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Night,
great
Tim.
night.
Have a good night.
Thank
Enjoy the
you.
island, baby. Love
Have a
it.
good night.
Bye, all.